For Fremantle, it's all guns blazing, and I think that's heartening for the Purple Army. He might well be one of the best two-way runners in the game, if not the best two-way runner in the game. Some of the younger players have shown some signs, but some of their senior players have been poor. And there are some critics who say, well, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? I'll put my hand up. I thought they had come out the other side.
Hello, I'm Mitch Keating, stepping in for Mark Stevens on the Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. As always, I'll be joined by WA footy expert Digby Beacham to chat everything the Eagles and Dockers. Let's get into it. Oh, Diggers, pleasure to be back with you on the Outer Wing. Let's start with the Freo Dockers. They've clinched the minor premiership, but it sounds like Justin Longmuir won't be taking it too easy against Carlton this weekend and might not be resting any players on the eve of finals.
Yeah, great to chat, Mitch. He's spot on. Yeah, he was fronting the media yesterday, Justin, and he said as much. And I think that's probably fair enough because, yes, there is going to be a bye after round 24 is completed and the like. But and I think we spoke about this last week, if Fremantle were to mass rest players for this game against Carlton at Marvel Stadium on the weekend, Mitch, it would be about 20 days before their next game, which would be a qualifying final at home. And that, you would think, would throw a little bit of a spanner in the works and might just be somewhat of a hindrance to the consistency and continuity that they've built. So I like the fact that Fremantle said, no, we're going over east and we're going to try to do a little bit better than what we did against Melbourne, albeit they weren't disgraced on that occasion. So what Carlton do, that is entirely up to them. There's some suggestions maybe they rest some players. But for Fremantle, it's all guns blazing, and I think that's heartening for the Purple Army.
So if you were in the selectors' chair, Diggers, you wouldn't rest anyone? You wouldn't give Hayden Young that extra conditioning? I guess there's an argument that he probably needs more game time in some space as well. But do you put Luke Jackson and just put him to the side and fine-tune a Mason Cox, and if Sean Darcy's available, you wouldn't rest anyone for this week's game?
No, I wouldn't, Mitch. And you can rest in game, I think, and that's what Fremantle have done a little bit over the last probably 6 to 8 weeks. You're not seeing as much of Luke Jackson on the ball late in games as that we saw in the first half of the season. You can rotate players through the bench, put them forward. And in terms of Hayden Young, they need to find out now. I've been quite vocal about this. I love Hayden Young. I think he's an absolute bona fide star and one of the better players in the competition, but he's had so much inconsistency with his body and some bad luck. And it's the old saying, do your business or get off the toilet. And that's what he needs to be able to do. And Fremantle need to find out, because if he breaks down against Carlton, so be it. I hate saying this, but I'd rather him break down against Carlton than 5 minutes into a qualifying final.
Yep. If we run back to Friday night, obviously the Dockers got it done to uphold their perfect record at home. It was a pretty tight battle against the Crows for many parts of the game. Was there anything that we really learnt about the Dockers at this stage of the season from that win?
I think what we learnt is that they're a formidable side at home. Their record at home would reflect that, Mitch. But what we have seen time and time again, haven't we, with Fremantle in 2026, is their ability to kick goals in clumps and their ability to finish games strongly. And so often this season we've seen it. We saw it against Sydney. We saw it against Geelong. We saw it against Hawthorn. We saw it again against Adelaide. Like when they're challenged and you think, okay, this is going to be interesting. How will they respond? They respond quite emphatically. And that was the case against Adelaide. Now, Adelaide aren't, I don't think, at the level of a couple of other sides that are in the cut and thrust of it all, but they gave a very good account of themselves. But Fremantle were able to kick goals quickly and then get separation between themselves and the Crows. So it's going to be a really, really tall order for a side to come over here and win a qualifying final, maybe even a preliminary final at Optus Stadium with nearly 60,000 Dockers fans crammed in.
Yeah, there's maybe one chink in the armour for the Dockers. The talk has been inaccuracy in front of goal. As good as their firepower is, they've missed a few. And I think their tally of more behinds than goals in games is now up to 8, which will make up more than a third of their season. How big of that is a concern for them heading into finals?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'm glad you said it was 8 as well, Mitch, because I've never been very good at maths, and I was trying to do the sums yesterday, and I came up with 8. I think there was one other game where they were the same, goals and behind. So, and it just seems like some of the games where they've been inaccurate have been these big games at home. We saw what happened with Geelong and obviously, Sydney as well. But what they are doing is they're winning games of football at home, but you would perhaps like to see them be a little bit more accurate than they have been. Some of their games interstate, they've been very good in front of goal. I think they were quite efficient against Melbourne, a fortnight ago, but that might just be the sole nag that you have with Fremantle. And if that's the case, it's not a bad nag to have because all other parts of their game are in pretty good shape.
And what's the injury latest over at the Dockers? It sounds like Murphy Reed's absence might extend into a second week, but that week off to come will certainly work in his favour more likely than not. But with Murphy Reed and others, what's the latest at selection?
Yeah, so Murphy won't play this week. He'll have another week off, so he'll be nice and fresh for the qualifying final, and we'll learn when that qualifying final takes place in the next week or so. So he won't play. Now, Jai Amos limped from the track yesterday with a foot concern, but he wasn't listed on the injury list, so it would be somewhat of a surprise if he wasn't on the plane and heading east, and he's in really good nick. He was terrific again on the weekend just gone, Jai Amos. I think he sits second on the Coleman Medal leaderboard behind Charlie Curnow. So it's a terrific season from that young man. Now, Sean Darcy sort of had a bit of a calf concern. He tweaked a calf again, had scans. They showed nothing majorly wrong. He completed training yesterday, so he was listed as a test. Now, whether he comes in this week or not, we'll have to wait and see, but I suspect that Mason Cox will get another opportunity just with that minor doubt over Sean and the calf injury.
And so what are the expectations this week against the Blues? Obviously, Carlton have a bit to play for, trying to maybe avoid an interstate wildcard game to start their finals campaign under newly assigned coach Josh Fraser. Obviously, the Dockers have a pretty good run of form against the Blues, recent history. Andy Brayshaw probably being one of them, in great form at the moment. I think it's now 15 consecutive games of 20-plus touches, and in the last 5 between Freo and Carlton, he's averaging close to 30 touches, which is the most of any player across the two sides. So how pivotal is he going to be, and what's the kind of expectation for the Dockers heading into their final game of the home and away season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose we wait and see. We have to. I'm not sure what Carlton are going to do selection-wise. Do they opt to rest a Walsh and a Cripps and a Jagger Smith and young Harry Dean? I don't know from this part of the country. Mitch, maybe you've got some more insight than what I can offer here now. But Fremantle, we know they're taking a full deck of cards east, and they're going to expose those cards. So there'll be nothing up the sleeve there. And we do know that Andy Brayshaw was terrific. He might well be one of the best two-way runners in the game, if not the best two-way runner in the game. I love the way he goes about it. He's integral to that midfield mix. He's got great hands and he's selfless. That's the one thing with Andy. He does everything he can to enhance the team's prospects of winning week upon week upon week, and he's doing a very good job of it in 2026. I think Fremantle packed too many punches, particularly given where they're situated and the season that they've done thus far and what's attainable from here on in with them, that they're clearly going to be at the forefront of the premiership push. Carlton, perhaps uncertainty over selection and whether they do decide just to look towards that wild card round might open the door for Fremantle to get a win and finish what has been a terrific home and away campaign.
Yeah, I think absolutely no reason they should be taking their foot off the throttle. And Brayshaw, one of the more underrated players, not the only time this season I think he's flown under the radar. In years gone by, it's been the same case as others have stood up alongside him. And as for the Blues, it's going to be, I think it's quite a tight battle. So expect a close contest for sure this weekend when they go head-to-head. All right, that is the Fremantle Dockers done for this week on the Outer Wing. And let's get into the West Coast Eagles, who are now coming off their 10th straight defeat. Is it fair to say that maybe Eagles fans are looking forward to cricket season?
I think so. It's a big number, isn't it, Mitch? 10. Like they lost that game, I think, just prior to their mid-season bye, but they also, I think you could mount an argument, they actually hit that mid-season bye with a hint of momentum. They'd been good in some games. And then when they came out of that mid-season bye, they were pretty poor. And to be fair, it's been a very underwhelming second half of the season for Andrew McWalter and his men, and that performance on the weekend off what was somewhat heartening against Collingwood. As much as they were beaten, they still were a young side against the Magpies, but I didn't foresee a blowout in the manner that we witnessed there before a very small crowd against GWS. They looked listless. They looked like a side who was limping to the finishing line. So it'll be fascinating to see what response, if any, we get this weekend here at home against Hawthorn from a West Coast viewpoint. There desperately needs to be one because they can't finish very, very poorly. They've had a horrible back half of the year. And if they have their backsides handed to them by the Hawks, I think the West Coast faithful will be a little bit restless over summer.
Yeah, you could even argue some of the players looked devoid of energy, if anything. And I think it's been obviously another tough, long season for them. I do want to, while we're talking about, Andy Brayshaw being a player flying under the radar, I feel like Tim Kelly's season has been very solid. After being, one who's copped his criticism in his time at the Eagles. I think he had another game against GWS like he did earlier in the season in that win over them where he really stood tall in midfield, another 20-plus touches. And I feel like, his season has been quite solid. But for the rest of the players, and I think there's a few to point out, look like they'll probably a step off on the weekend.
Yeah, agree. And you're right with Tim. He's come under some criticism on this part of the country because of how his form tapered. He hasn't perhaps lived up to expectations since arriving back home. He had one really good year, which was recognised significantly in the John Worsfold medal, but he's been hit and miss. He asked to be dropped. During Andrew McQualter's era, and I think that caught Andrew by surprise. He needed to go back, and he's on record as saying he fell out of love with the game, and that's part of the Adam Simpson tenure and how badly West Coast were beaten time after time at the back end of Adam's stint here as West Coast coach. So you're right, Tim's been okay. Harley Reid's been terrific. Some of their kids have been good. Some of the younger players have shown some signs, but some of their senior players have been poor. And they need to be a lot better, provided they're on their list into 2027, because this West Coast group of players, they need their senior core to show the way.
So what is the biggest, I guess, issue when you're looking at West Coast's list and squad as a whole? Is it a matter of talent? Is it, I guess, a matter of skill? Or is it maybe more culture-based? What do you think is the one that they should be circling over the off-season?
There's a lot, Mitch, to be fair. There's a lot. One thing that needs to be corrected here is the culture and this losing culture that West Coast have, Mitch. And if I was to say to you, what's their win-loss record over the last 3 to 4 years, you would come up with a number, and I still think you'd probably be a little bit shy. They've won 15 of their last 117 games, West Coast.
Yeah.
They lost the last 4 games of 2021, and since then they've gone 2-20, 3-20, 5-18, 1-22, and they're 4-18. So it's been a dreadful 5-season stint for West Coast. And there are some critics who say, well, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? I'll put my hand up. I thought they had come out the other side. I still think they have, but boy, oh boy, they've still got some work to do.
Yeah, I think one number that kind of highlights where the list's at a little bit, I think they only had 3 players who played the Giants on the weekend who have actually won a game against GWS in New South Wales before. So it goes to show not only are their senior players quite scarce, but the success that a lot of their playing group have had is equally scarce as well. So it's obviously a major concern for them when we head into what will be their last game of the season up against the Hawks. So while we're not expecting a win, I'm sure Eagles fans would love to see their players just grit and grind their way through to the final bell and hopefully not look like they've been checked out too early. Do you think they can give the Hawks a good run to finish off their campaign?
I'd like to say yes, Mitch, but of what we witnessed against GWS, I'm not so sure. One thing we do know often with younger sides, like they hit the wall, and West Coast look like they have most definitely hit the wall, but you do get better responses at home than you do interstate, and that's only natural. You're comfortable, you've got that crowd, and a little moment is celebrated by the crowd as opposed to deathly silence when you're interstate. So, look, their game against Collingwood was encouraging in parts. Look, the issue for them, I think, on the weekend, Mitch, is how do you slow Hawthorn down? We know that Hawthorn like to be quite proactive and, really take the game on. And if West Coast are operating on tired legs and tired minds, they might be quite susceptible to a shellacking, and Hawthorn need to get this job done over here. So they're going to be blessed with lovely weather, conditions which should suit the way that Hawthorn like to go about it. So I think the line with TABtouch is around that 7.5 goal mark. It would be a shock if West Coast were able to stay within 5 or 6 goals, I
Mm.
think, off what we witnessed against the Giants.
Well, hopefully the Eagles can finish their season on a high, and that wraps up our segment for West Coast on today's episode.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about. What are you really gambling with?
Now let's get into your list of the week. It's going to be quite an interesting one because we've got the list priorities for both Fremantle and the West Coast Eagles. Two clubs certainly heading in different directions this off-season. You would think, well, maybe we'll start with Freo. Maybe it's a bit trickier, I'm sure, to get three listed down. But what do you have for the Dockers? What would be their priorities over the next few months coming off what's been a strong push for a premiership?
Yeah, well, they don't want for much, Mitch. That's quite obvious because this has been a wonderful list build and an organic list build in respect to father, sons, and any sort of concessions that some of the other clubs have been handed. So this is a pure list build, and this club is built for sustained success. So the demographic of this list, I think there's only 5 or 6 players 30 years or over, and a lot of their young talent has been signed long-term. Now, one of those players who has been signed long-term is Sean Darcy. He's not in the side at the moment. He's battled his body. We know that. Mason Cox is in the first year of a 2-year deal and has been quite a able replacement for Sean. Luke Jackson, is clearly the number one big man at the Fremantle Dockers and is going to be so, you would think, for the rest of his days. So Sean Darcy's contracted for another 4 years on money which is close to 7 figures. So they need to work out whether there's a future for Sean Darcy at this football club or whether you say, you know what, Sean, you've been great for us, but we can survive without you. And that's what they are doing at the moment. So therefore, I think there's going to be some suitors, and that might allow them to get back into the draft and then maybe satisfy another club with some selections to try and prioritise WA talent. So that brings me to the number 2 here with what Fremantle need, Mitch, and that is some experience and class behind the ball. Now, defensively, they're very sound, but Alex Pearce is 31 and he's probably got the body of a 33, 34-year-old Alex. And respectfully, I say that because he's a warrior and a great leader. And also Luke Ryan and Oscar McDonald are on the other side of 30. But if you can get a Sam Taylor into the mix, he's 27 years of age, a WA boy, great intercept marker, great lockdown defender when required. He played State of Origin. He's a proud West Australian. I think it would be foolish if both Fremantle and West Coast weren't asking the question of Sam Taylor to strengthen up that defence. And the third thing I think for Fremantle is, and you can't have too many midfielders, Mitch, just add to it. You've got Murphy Reid who floats through there, Shea Bolton who floats through there, you've got Hayden Young, you've got Brayshaw, you've got Sarong, you've got so much talent there. You've got Johnson and Erasmus. But if another blue chip midfielder was on the table, I think Fremantle would look at that as well.
Well, there you go. That's it for the Dockers. But what about the West Coast Eagles? Keeping it to a list of 3, I'm sure you could probably look to 5 or 6. But what are we thinking for West Coast? What would be at the top of their board when it comes to the next phase of their list build?
Skill. Just inject as much talent and skill and prioritise skill, Mitch. I must admit, we see Andrew's game plan and it's got hallmarks of Richmond, and I can understand that to an extent because we saw what Richmond were able to do with Damien Hardwick, and it was a bit of a chaotic brand of football. Get that ball forward and let some of your players go to work. Well, that's not washing in the current climate and what's expected from an AFL player and AFL clubs right here, right now. You need to have some talent, and talent that is able to hit targets, make good decisions, and be really precise with your execution. We're not seeing anywhere near the level required from West Coast, and it's been a concern for some time. So that is something they need to address, and they need to address it urgently, because if it isn't improved in 2027, one wonders what the future of Andrew McQualter is going to look like. So that is number one priority. Emphasise the importance of skill and get players in who are able to hit targets regularly, because if you're not, you're turning the football over, and we know defensively they've got some areas which need addressing as well. So 1, skill. 2, again, Sam Taylor behind the ball. They lost Ruben Ginbey halfway through the season. He was having a really good year, often asked to play above his height and carry out tasks which shouldn't be employed by a player of his, I suppose, physical attributes. Sam Taylor, again, I mentioned it with Fremantle. You have to ask the question of Sam Taylor if you're West Coast because, respectfully, I don't think Sandy Brock, Tyler Young are the answer behind the ball. Harry Edwards has got his concussion issues. We haven't seen much of him in 2026. So they're key defensive stocks at West Coast. I think Rhett Bazzo's been very, very good. He's had to work hard to get in that side, but he's been terrific. So he's a positive, but their lack of options, particularly in the key position stocks defensively, is quite glaring for mine, Mitch. And the third one, I think, is it just gives much talent. And if that means it's WA talent, so be it. But just try to get some more experienced talent, some proven talent into the club. They've tried it. They have tried it. I'm not saying they haven't addressed this. They went and got a Tyler Brockman. He's been a bust. They've identified some WA boys, i.e. a Liam Baker. He's had a poor second season. His first year was good. Jack Graham's been a little bit injury prone at West Coast, but they need some experience and they need some class because at the moment, as we touched on, their record is very much reflective of a side devoid of talent.
Well, there you go. That's Diggers' 3-step plan for the Eagles to get back into premiership contention. All right, I think you've got a couple bets for us for this week's episode as well.
I have, Mitch. The Fremantle Carlton game, we're doing this chat on a Wednesday morning, so we don't know the composition of the Carlton side. We do know that Fremantle are going to take as full a strength side as possible, but I thought Fremantle 1-39. I know it's a little bit of a boring bet option, but 1-39, that's paying $2.25 with TABtouch wasn't the worst way to go. Now, the Hawthorn West Coast game, I'm quite confident this game has got some points in it. Now, the game total is 182.5. I think the game will go beyond that. I suspect that Hawthorn will be quite positive, and we do know that they can kick a total, Hawthorn. So game total in a same-game multi, Mitch, over 182.5. Jack Ginnivan to have 15-plus disposals and also kick at least one goal. That's paying $2.80 with TABtouch.
Plenty of value there, and be sure to gamble responsibly. Well, Diggers, thanks again for jumping on for the Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. We'll see you next time.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.